Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wiltshire today, joined by Tim, the free and very O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, Tim. Living the
How's the
dream.
new little man?
Um, you know, he pooped my pants like 3 times today. He
Good for him.
he pooped my pants for me. Just all over the
Nice.
place. But that's newborn life. That's how it goes.
It is. It is. And look, man, it's such a chore. I'm glad that you have that you are taking some time from away from work, but
Yeah.
not from podcasting. So,
Yeah,
you know, good for you, man. Like
that's
that
right.
this especially this first couple weeks is really I can
Man,
remember doing pretty much the same thing, and it was like it was a grind, man.
every 3 hours. That's what it is. Sometimes more, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but it's all right. Wife and I have a system. I take first shift. She takes second shift. During overnights. I've managed to get 4 or 5 hours solid sleep every night, which is a lot for a newborn.
That's great. I wish at my age, Kevin, that I could get 4 or 5 hours worth of solid sleep at night. I'd
Yeah, right.
almost rather be up taking care of a kid, to be honest with you.
Well, if you feel nostalgic about that, come on over, take care of him. You can take the 11 to 4 shift.
Well,
Um,
we have a grandkid on the way, so I
oh
might get
yeah.
some of that
There you go.
action. To be
You
honest.
can I'm sure they wouldn't mind helping out every once in a while. Grandpa can come in and just
Oh,
take that overnight.
my wife's a psychopath like that. Like not and in a good way. She is like, hey, you guys want to go out? Like, we'll stay home, and I'll be like, what? You know what I mean? Like, hold up a sec.
That's awesome. Um, but yeah, no, it's fun. Um,
Cool, man.
so but yeah, no, we have a few things to talk about tonight, folks. So we have a Supreme Court justice opining on the First Amendment. Um,
Doesn't want to hamstring the government. God bless her, man. Had such high hopes
yeah,
for her.
and then some bad laws have some unsurprising consequences. We'll talk about a few
Yeah,
examples of this, and we'll talk about a thing that kind of went around Twitter today about illegal immigrants and guns, maybe some
yeah.
other immigration issues as well. And we'll see what else we get to.
Yeah.
You know how
I'd
we
like to.
do on these shows.
Yeah, I have
Go
a
ahead.
true story that I want to share with the WYSL audience that should wake them up to the fiasco that is our immigration system. Like good people
Yeah,
get caught in the crosshairs of this thing, man. And
that's right.
I'm not saying anybody's a bad person either. Like that, there's enough of that going around. Like we don't need me like contributing to that narrative.
Yeah, right. There's a
So
lot about
anyway,
that, but anyway, so got a bunch of stuff. Of course, if you think of something else that you want to talk about, throw it in the comments. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe. But we always love hearing from you either way. Thanks everyone who's listening so far. All right, we're gonna jump into the radio show in about 10 seconds. Bye.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wiltshire today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, brother. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, Tim. Living the dream.
I know you are, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm sure the WYSL audience would like a little update on the new Wilson. You know?
The new Lil Wilson is doing
Yeah.
great. He is staying up all night. I was explaining before the show that he has pooped my pants several times. It just
Good
a
for him.
little bit of leakage there. That's how newborns are though. He's peed all over me several times today. But that's what little newborn boys do.
Yeah.
You think I would
Newborn
learn? I'm a
girls too.
second time dad. Yeah, girls
Yeah.
too. But a second time dad. You think I'd know? Like, okay, like just don't be casual about the diaper changes. You're gonna get hit.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope, you forget at 2:30 in the morning. That's just something that happens.
Sure.
But Tim, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, all right. Good.
Yeah.
But we do have some other things to talk about. We do have some actual policy things to talk about today, besides just chatting about my newborn, who's adorable. But policy things to talk about. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court justice opining on the First Amendment. We're going to talk about some bad laws and the unsurprising consequences of those bad laws. And we're going to talk about a little bit of immigration stuff. And then, of course, we see where the night takes us. If you have comments out there, we see a few folks listening out there. Shout out Shelly on YouTube leaving comments. But if you have any ideas about other things to talk about, happy to hear from you. If it's something good, maybe we'll talk about it on the show. All right, so Tim, why don't you introduce what happened with the Supreme Court justice and the her opinion on how the First Amendment hamstrings the government?
Well, okay. First of all, she should have never went public with her commentary, and I'm actually referring to a Reason article, Kevin. And guys, Reason's been bashed in libertarian circles. It's been bashed. Like they seem to kind of go woke occasionally. But and look, that's an opinion and interpretation, right? I get it.
So fine. Well, it's so funny because like all the leftists think like they're like this conservative pro-Trump magazine, like, and I see that all the time too.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, they're supporting cops and blah blah blah. Okay, yeah. Reason known for their pro-police stancing. Yes, that's.
Oh, first of all, I want to reiterate that I think overall Reason is a nice bridge between us libertarians and the rest of the world. They find things to criticize. They go after things really hard. I'm still mad about them going after Oliver Anthony. I didn't quite get that. I love that guy. But look, Kevin, so Ketanji starts off with her biggest concern is that your view of the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways. And she's literally like on paper, on a video, on audio, talking about how that very much concerns her. Now, in my mind, the First Amendment was actually written to constrain the government, to keep the government out of our rights to assemble, our rights to communicate, and our rights to especially talk to each other. So, I mean, should we make a lot out of this? Like, people want her impeached for this, Kevin.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit overwrought a bit. like it's like I know like some folks are like they took this as like her saying like, oh, this is a bad restriction on government, but it's not necessarily like it is a fact, right? The First Amendment does hamstring the government by design. It is supposed to hamstring the government. That is the purpose of the First Amendment, because we're going to talk about all sorts of rights today, but like your rights are inherent. You have those rights naturally, or they're God-given rights. However you want to conceive of those, you have these natural rights, including the right to speech. And the First Amendment, as well as the Second Amendment, are restrictions on the government. Many of the amendments are restrictions on the government, third, fourth, etc. They are saying, government, you cannot infringe on these fundamental rights. We are saying that the federal government is not allowed to violate free speech. It's not allowed to violate freedom of assembly. It's not allowed to, violate your right to self-defense, the shall not be infringed thing. So that's what the amendments to the Constitution do. They limit the government. So by design, the First Amendment does hamstring the government in significant ways. And now, how far you want to take that, right? Like, is it, if you are making it, because what this has to do with, right? Like the case is the Murphy versus Missouri, which is basically saying that the case about whether or not Joe Biden administration violated the First Amendment when it was asking like social media companies to remove like misinformation or other harmful information, right?
Right.
Which I think both you and I agree the government should not be doing that.
No,
generally, yeah.
Look, referring to the article, brings to light what we're talking about here. Her hamstringing comments, and again, I'm referring to the Reason article.
Yeah.
Her hamstringing comments came attached to a hypothetical scenario she posed to Benjamin Aguinaga, the Louisiana Solicitor General, who argued that the Biden administration had overstepped when it contacted social media platforms and attempted to pressure them to remove posts, which I found pretty egregious when it happened. And they certainly went after content providers and people that were making arguments about COVID in a very drastic and very chilling way. But she brings up the hypothetical. Suppose a challenge circulated on social media concerning teens jumping out of windows at increasing elevations. Could the government try to persuade those platforms to remove that content? That's the context of what she was asking, and
Yeah.
that's why she was asking, should the government be hamstrung in a situation like that? It's kind of a perfectly reasonable question, you know.
Right. Yeah. It's
I
not
think the way
that
that
bad.
she phrased it is a little bit chilling,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. No, it's a little bit, right? And but it's a, I guess, a fair question to ask and that's kind of what it's a fair question to ask in the context of like, because what actually happened in this case with like the social media companies is the Biden administration didn't say outright, take this stuff down or else we're going to punish you, right? Like, or else like we will take away your license to operate a social media company.
Right.
They hadn't passed that law yet. That's the TikTok bans come up next.
Yeah,
No,
it's
no,
next.
but
It's on. They realized that they didn't have enough power, and so now they're working on getting it.
yeah. But they kind of they jawboned them. They're like, hey, well, like maybe we'll develop some regulations in the future. We could make your life difficult. Is one of those sort of things where they didn't directly threaten social media companies. They didn't threaten to use social media power. They asked nicely, but also like it was a speak softly and carry a big stick type of thing. Like
Sure,
the big
and
stick
they
isn't a
offered.
lot.
Yeah, and they offered money, like they paid money to the social media
Yeah,
platforms to have their compliance officers, available and offering advice about all sorts of messaging. And it certainly contributed to the suppression of the Hunter Biden's laptop story. It certainly contributed to a number of other things. And while you and I have talked about how the impact of the money to the social media platforms, we have a disparate opinion on what the impact of that might be, but we get what we incentivize, right? And if we're offering money and we're carrying the big stick of government, I think that had a pretty profound impact on what social media was doing at that time.
yeah,
Does that make
right.
sense to you?
And
Like that,
it,
I feel was wrong,
no,
Well,
no, it
not
does. And
really.
just
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just
All
to
right.
give some context to the listeners too about like what the money that you're talking about was basically the government would ask companies like Twitter for like different types of like takedown requests and stuff like that, right? Like so different types of requests on like user information takedown requests, stuff that they felt was like damaging or dangerous, and it happened so frequently that these government agents and agencies would ask for stuff that social media companies started saying, hey, if you're going to make us go fetch this info for us for like whatever reason, like whether it's part of a criminal investigation or like just requests for false information to be taken down, etc., we're going to start charging you for it. We're going to start charging you for our time.
The government said, we have the deepest pockets in the world. No worries.
Like, yeah, we'll just reach into taxpayers' pockets again and like we'll pay you. No big deal. Why didn't you just say so? This is just about money. Whatever.
Yeah, no, we can do that. No problem. But again, I think that the impact can get pretty drastic there. As I mentioned, like when you have that kind of cash flow readily available that you could just, hey, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll hire a new guy. Like that's very profitable, like no bid style kind of stuff. And it definitely is incentivizing a contraction of free speech. So
Yeah.
certainly Twitter has some rights to manage their platform.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily agree with how they always managed it, especially back then. But arguably they have that right. It's a private company, bro.
No, I get it. That's why, like, I'm fine with like what Twitter did here because, like, at some point in time too, if I were running a company, I'd be like, hey, listen, you got to pay me for this. Like
Yeah.
no, like this isn't a favor. Like, either compel me with court action or, you know, or
Yeah.
start paying me for my time.
Well, yeah, and
And
that was the other side of the coin, right? The stick that they were carrying. Like we will, could you imagine the constant threat of legal action? Legal action gets pretty expensive. So
yeah, there's like the legal action side of it. There's maybe we're going to rework Section 230 and make you the platforms liable for the content that individual users put on there, which again, I know there's some folks on the right who are like, oh, we should get rid of Section 230. It's kind of died down a bit, but like, like what would end up happening in that case is then the government would constantly be going in and individual actors be going into, hey, you platform this person saying this libelous thing, this untrue thing, this illegal thing, whatever, and like trying to get the companies to do something about it. And the companies are going to be proactive and just shut down everything. Like, so yeah, that would not be good if it went that way. And so let's get back to the question though. Like, should government ever be able to say to like a social media company, like there's been all sorts of stupid challenges on like TikTok and stuff, right? Like, like I was just reminded of this one the other day. Do you remember the one a couple of years ago where people were like walking on milk crates and they were trying to like walk on a stack of like milk crates to stack like 10 high and people kept falling down?
no, I remember the Tide Pod one, but
Yeah,
I
oh
didn't.
yeah, it's the Tide Pod
Catch the
thing,
milk
which I
the
think
milk
actually,
crate one.
I think that predated. So like the milk crate one, I'm thinking of specifically because TikTok did end up suppressing that because like it went viral really quick and people kept doing it, and making videos of them like climbing up these stacks of milk crates, and then like, Tim, what do you think happens if you try to like run up a stacked of milk crates that's like 10 high?
Yeah,
You're gonna
well,
fall
eventually
over.
it's going to collapse, and somebody's going to, milk crates are pretty hard plastic. Look, it's got a lot of bad consequences, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right. Like I mean, you're sometimes 6, 7, 8 feet off the ground. They were doing these.
yeah,
They try to like run up like a ramp of them, and
yeah.
it's a tower not connected to anything. People would fall over or hurt themselves, and so like the government in that case didn't end up stepping in and doing anything about it. I think the company, as far as I remember, and if I'm wrong about this, I apologize. Correct me in the comments or send us an email about it. But I'm pretty sure TikTok just saw this and they're like, that's really stupid. We're going to just like suppress these type of videos, right? Because TikTok has the purview to do that. And I know it's kind of controversial that they could possibly suppress anything, but like they've done it before. Like, oh, hey, if you're doing something where you're encouraging people to hurt themselves, we're gonna stop showing those types of videos. Like there's another one where people were doing, what was it, like the penny challenge or something? Like people were like trying to like drop a penny like in a partially plugged in plug. There's all sorts of dumb stuff that like goes on there. But like, yeah, if you do something that's like encouraging someone to do something dangerous, TikTok sort of overcorrects on this sometimes, and they'll say, nope. Sometimes they'll put a warning label on it, being like, this is performed by professionals, whatever, right? You see that for like the
Like,
skydiver things, but
yeah, yeah, like the jackass stunts. Don't try this at home,
yeah,
kids.
exactly.
Like,
Like so
all right,
yeah, there's some of like that type of stuff where it's like, oh, this is performed by professionals and it's people doing like dangerous stuff. But then there's like the viral trends that happen with with some of this stuff where people are doing sometimes ridiculous or dangerous things, and the companies don't want their users to get hurt, and they are afraid of the government do that. So does the government have, Tim, the ability to say something about this, the obligation to say something about this, or should the government stay out of like the viral trend of, what if someone is trying to encouraging people to jump out windows? The
now,
defenestration trend is happening, and like
do they have an obligation? No, it would be the same way. Like, do they? But could they and should they offer good information and the best available information that they have at the time and unbiased information? Yeah, I think arguably if we have a government that's a government service that I could tolerate, Kevin. You see what I mean? But what happens is now everything is contextualized, everything is narrative driven, everything is with an eye
well,
on pulling
see,
votes
Tim,
away from somebody.
well, that's a tough part. You can't just say like, oh, well, if we had a government of angels, then like, yes, this would be fine. We don't.
I know. So they Yeah, I know, but in a way, like I became a libertarian because we don't have a government of angels, and the government has gotten too
Right.
big. I would settle for a useful government who provided information, like if they wanted to say, hey, you know what's really bad for you? Climbing milk crates at a breakneck speed, or sniffing Tide Pods. Like these things are bad for you. The cinnamon challenge, there's another thing,
Listen,
arguably
Cinnamon challenge. I
pretty
remember that
unhealthy
the milk
maneuver, right?
challenge, and I
Yeah.
mean,
So
although Tim, you know that if the government steps up and they say, guys, listen, please quit throwing yourselves out the window. You know what the libertarian movement's going to do? Immediately start throwing themselves out the window. Like just 100%. Like, no, you can't tell me what to do, bro. I'm gonna show everyone how much I hate the state.
Arguably, I could see that some sort of reaction that way. Maybe, I don't know. It's always a challenge there because we want them to be. Everybody kind of wants the government to be smaller and effective, right? Like safer and effective, if you will. But they're not. That's where we have the problem, And sure, we get so reactive to the government that if they told us to stop jumping out of windows, we would start. I'm not sure if that's true. I do like that idea, though.
Hey, well,
I could see me
if
kind
Joe
of wanting
Biden,
to jump out the window.
if Dr. Fauci came out of retirement and said, guys, please stop jumping out of windows, there'd be a lot of libertarians like, you can't tell me what to do, bro. I remember what you did with COVID. I'm going to do the opposite of whatever you say.
Which is fair. Like he was pretty bad on COVID, it would be kind of like, all right, I think this guy is lying to me right now,
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, my worry is that Dr. Fauci does that. He says, stop jumping out of the windows. And he'd say, because it causes COVID. And there'd be the Democrats would be like, oh, yes, we need to board up all the windows. That causes COVID. Like, we know we got to keep everyone safe. And then some libertarians are like, no, we're going to jump out windows now. We're going to jump out all of them. And then a bunch of us are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, all right, I'm going to keep going about my business.
That does seem to be a pretty good way to handle some of the reactionary stuff that we see out there. Just kind of keep doing what you're doing, man. And everything is going to be okay.
I'm going to use some common sense. I'm not going to jump out the window. I didn't really need the government to tell me not to jump out a window, and I don't think their connection is correct here, that it causes these other problems. But I'm gonna just keep living my life, inside of buildings.
Yeah, why not?
Using the doors as intended.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That does. So, arguably, it's an interesting case. It's an interesting situation. It will be interesting to see how they rule on it, and then we'll see what legislation gets inspired by this ruling. If it comes down not in favor of the government, like what sorts of things end up on the table after that. And so, look, I'm sympathetic to the people who found her comments chilling. They weren't that different from comments that Brent Kavanaugh made when he admitted to being a press release guy for a senator, and he would go kind of strong arm reporters and manipulate their coverage. Is that something that government agents have the right to do, to try to manipulate the coverage? Like, arguably,
being a good
trying
PR
to keep
person
safe makes sense, but
yeah, I mean, you try to get people to do what you say. It's just where's across the line of like you are using the either direct or implied power of the government to change someone's speech or to compel a company or organization to change what they're doing. That's when it starts to become more of a problem.
Yeah.
All right. But on that note, though, we have to head to break. Thanks again for joining us here on WYSL on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. Yeah, sorry to cut you off. We're like 30 seconds over.
No, that's all right. I was gonna make a joke anyway, and it's fine. And I already forgot the joke.
No. But
so look, we've got a bunch of viewers out there in the Twitter world, Kevin, and I want, if they feel so inclined, I think that some of them may want to tell me that I'm being too soft on the government right now. And if I will read your comments at least on the break, if you guys leave some comments out there.
Yeah. No, let's see it. Is Tim being too much of a statist today? I mean, basically it sounded like he was on Supreme Court Justice Jackson's side and President Biden's side on this one. That's how
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's how I interpreted it. I would leave your comments as if that were the case.
that would be fun. I think then I would feel defensive and I would get busy defending myself, right? Um, but yeah, so it is like she did demonstrate a fundamental in that sentence, a fundamental misunderstanding of the First Amendment. But arguably, if you take the whole context together, you're like, is the government going to issue warnings? Is the government still going to be somebody out in Facebook land said take the warning labels off the box and let everything work itself out? Um, yeah, yeah, sure. That in a way does make sense. But I think we all have grown accustomed to a government that provides us with information like the food pyramid on how to keep us healthy. Oh, wait. So
Ah,
there's a lot of problems with the government offering information, Kevin, over the years. Some of that information seems to have been bought and paid for by lobbyists, right?
yeah. I mean, the way I've
And
talked about
so
it is like it would be great if the government was a good neutral clearinghouse for information. Like I think we'd be in a better world if that's how like the Department of Education operated, right? Probably unnecessary, but like if that
Mhm.
was a compromise solution is drastically reduce the Department of Education and make it a clearinghouse for information about best practices for education nationwide. Okay, cool. That's a fair compromise for now. Um, but you're right though. It's like they're not. You can't treat that. People want to treat government information as like somehow um sacrosanct, right? Like it is above information provided by private sources, but it's not. It's just the government is made of people in the same way that corporations and nonprofits and any other entity is made of people who have their own agendas and biases and weaknesses. And you need to factor all that into account. So the government is just another source of information on this stuff. And going back to that example, like because I would almost go like, no, the government really doesn't need to be involved in this. Like, I don't need to hear from Senator Schumer about the latest TikTok trend. There's absolutely a nonprofit or just groups of moms out there who are going to tell us why it's a bad idea to jump out the window, right? Like we don't need the government to get involved in this stuff. Like most of the time, like the only I'll make like one sort of like complicated exception, which would have been like better is like, should the government get involved if someone is sharing illegal activity or advice on how to perform illegal activities on a social media platform, say stealing Kias?
no,
Okay, maybe
no,
like
I don't
that.
think they should. Yeah, no, I
You
don't
don't
think
think
they
the
should.
government should get involved in
You-
that either? I don't know. So like
I don't know.
that's the only one that's
I actually, you
complicated to me.
kind of
Like I
broke up
if
on me.
oh no. we have to ditch the videos
Yeah,
again, Tim. Um
I think so. I think
no,
we might have to ditch them for a minute.
yeah. No, so
My
all I was
wife is
saying is
probably
like
watching TikTok. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
quit using the bandwidth. You have like a half megabyte of bandwidth to go
Yeah.
to work with here. All I was saying was that if someone's showing you how to do something illegal, I think that starts to dive into the realm of like, well, should the government get involved? Something that's illegal is not like a victimless crime, right? Like I talked about like stealing cars. Is it just
Okay.
academic, or or is that actually harmful? I don't know.
It would be useful to know, like, let's say, in the case of the zombie apocalypse and cars still have battery chargers, like
Yeah,
there are going to be a lot of available vehicles out there and you're going to
yeah,
want to be able to start them. The
yeah.
internet right
I
now.
think I
I
still
don't know.
fall. I think I still fall on the side of like individuals and nonprofit organizations should pressure platforms to take this stuff down in their own right. You're still going to end up with some problematic stuff. Like they're gonna censor people. Like again, like the government wasn't always the one behind like Facebook's decision to say that like the Wuhan like virus leak theory was fake news, right? That wasn't just
Right.
the government like saying that. That was individuals who made that decision. Both like
Right.
within Meta and outside of Meta, pressuring them to take that position. So I think I still fall down on the does the First Amendment limit the government from speaking out in all these cases? Well, maybe not, but the government should probably butt out in most cases anyway. It's just
Right.
it's beneath the government. Like the focus, like my goodness, you have limited attention span. I mean, like in theory, they should have limited money too. They don't, but in theory, they should have limited resources. But
Right.
just
And
focus on
therein lies
governing
the
well,
problem,
dude.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I agree.
but
No, I agree. I think, as usual, we get pretty close. Yeah, Shelly, we have a little bit of I haven't gotten my new broadcast system or my new computer. So occasionally we start getting laggy, and if we turn off the video, we experience drastically improved performance.
yeah, we can actually understand each other. If we turn off the video.
Yeah.
But and Joe, you threw out the Brain Injury Awareness Day at the Capitol in Albany.
All right.
That's cool. To meet with legislators. It's a thing I know like a lot of groups do. They said they go do a day in Albany and they meet in and just try to educate legislators about various issues. Good for you, Joe. If you're participating and you end up doing that, like we'd be curious to hear how it went.
Yeah, no, we definitely would. And that's a First Amendment activity right there, Kevin, that she's participating in.
It's technically lobbying. That's what it is.
Mhm.
It's individuals lobbying, but so anyway, we should probably head back in a minute. But so we'll get into I guess we'll get into some of the bad laws that are out there.
Yeah, let's do it.
Got a few of these. Pornhub one, the Seattle food delivery stuff, the Minneapolis rideshare stuff. We'll get into all this.
All right.
We'll go back in, I don't know, about 10 seconds.
That sounds good.
5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson here today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm still here, Kevin, and we're going to get into an always an interesting libertarian topic: bad laws and their actual unintended consequences. Right? We've got legislators that write laws, ostensibly to protect people from harmful things, basically on the internet, basically to enhance people's rights, and sometimes, Kevin, all too often, those laws don't turn out the way that the legislators want them to. So, which one are we going to start with? We've got a few of them out there tonight.
Yeah, we'll go quickly with the Pornhub. Well, it wasn't specifically Pornhub, but it is an age verification for pornography law down in Texas. Basically, the state of Texas passed a law that said that they wanted to make sure that people under 18 couldn't consume porn, so that you have to that these websites that contain pornography now have to verify the ages of people who are visiting their site. And a couple of states have tried to pass this: Texas, Louisiana, Utah. The Pornhub immediately turned off there, and essentially, what they have to do is they have to they'd have to collect the state issue ID, basically. So what ended up happening is that they just blocked it in Texas because Pornhub and other sites would be liable for not following this law if they didn't verify the actual identity of all of its users. Tim, what are your thoughts on this? Good law, bad law, not surprising law?
Well, first of all, Kevin, I have no idea what Pornhub is, so maybe
I think you can guess from context. You're a smart guy; you can put it together.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously, the thing that probably concerns most people is that now somehow they would have to input for an official ID verification. I don't think that Pornhub is going to benefit from it, and obviously, people are not going to want to be putting their driver's licenses to access Pornhub content, Kevin.
No,
so
that's
going to have a very chilling effect on Pornhub's revenues.
Yeah,
the
pornography sites. And so here's the thing that I don't like about this law in particular. One, you should be able to participate in certain activity on the internet and not have to upload your government ID. That's but here's what ends up happening with a lot of these things, right? Like it starts out with like, well, of course we don't want kids looking at pornography. Like, how could you be against that? So it's reasonable to have to upload your ID to view on the site and participate in any of the site's content. But what ends up happening in a lot of these situations is like it starts out that way. It starts out like, oh, it's to protect the children, right?
Right. Always.
And then suddenly you're doing the same thing for Facebook because, well, you know what? Like, you don't really have a right to anonymous speech. Like, I mean, we know how fake news can spread on Facebook. Like, we need everyone to like verify their actual identity and connect that to an individual profile. And so, like, and Facebook's like started that already. Like,
Yep.
I had to upload my ID to run ads. Twitter could do the same thing. You know, these other sites will start doing that. So suddenly, like, you have to upload a government ID for everything, for a random comment section, because it becomes a liability on the websites if they don't verify the actual identities. This is like we talked about Section 230 a little bit in the last segment.
Yep.
This is sort of like the soft erosion of Section 230, where like, you know, you lose some of the anonymous speech. You start like doing all these different things to, like, verify the individual users to like allow the government to, you know, contact any folks who are using the site. Like, and it comes in under the guise of like safety and security and protecting children, but it pretty quickly turns into setting up the infrastructure for governments to be able to police speech. What do you think?
All right. So
Too far?
no,
Am I putting on my foil hat here? What was
well, in arguably, and again, we get to that point of this ostensible sense of the government of Texas, first of all, has rights, you know, not granted by the Constitution. Like that, the citizens of Texas can ask for things that they want that may be not perfectly in line with what the federal government wants. Your argument of a slippery slope, I find appealing, and certainly that makes a lot of sense. It's like, okay, we forced Pornhub into this relationship with the government and forcing people to upload IDs, but where does that end? And
Yeah.
so in that sense, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. Now, a part of me again is like, well, I get what Texas wants there, right? Like they don't want kids getting on Pornhub.
Yeah.
That's completely understandable. I
Yeah.
don't like it.
And
I feel the slippery slope for sure.
yeah. You know, and I want to throw out like because there's different ways of being able to do it too. Like the Louisiana law, they did an interesting thing where Louisiana created a state database where you can get like a user ID number that was verifiable as like a real person over the age of 18, but these websites wouldn't have access to your actual identity. So the state can still trace it back, but like so they despite Louisiana having a similar law, they had different ways of being able to do it. But it still comes back to like the government wants to know every person who's using this service. And again, it's not like because it's easy to make that exception for like pornography, right? Like, oh, like it skeeves us out, like, and like we don't want kids accessing it, which is fair. And okay, so we have to do something about it in just this case. And we did that too with like with sex worker sites too, with like the what's it, CISPA? Is that the one I'm thinking of? Or SESTA. So basically, like what happened with like Backpage, right? Like we're like, oh, like there could in theory be sex trafficking going on here among like your people who are sex workers. Therefore, we're gonna develop all these draconian laws to verify stuff, to go after people, to make assumptions about like the type of activities that you're doing and the harm that's done to people, and it creates the infrastructure to be able to take down other websites and other activities.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I got a quote from the TexasTribune.org that I think people are going to find interesting at the very least, and he's a guy that's advocating on behalf of Pornhub, the First Amendment. He's not particularly he's not employed by Pornhub, right? But he's like, there's a and his name is Thomas Leatherberry, which kind of a wild name, but there's a troubling trend in the legislature where, despite all the lawyers that are in the legislature, they don't seem to care about constitutional issues as long as it's popular with their voters. And I think that
Right.
that's a pretty thrilling point. Like, we should be excited when somebody is actually out there making this argument that when we look at a guy like Thomas Massey, almost all of his arguments are based on constitutionality. Like, I'm sure he would try to avoid the Pornhub argument directly, but
Yeah.
when we're looking at our spending, when we're looking at our military actions, all of these things based on our understanding of the Constitution go against what the Constitution dictates or what the Constitution suggests. And so that would be a persuasive, or should be a persuasive argument, as well as the slippery slope of, hey,
Yeah.
we have some sort of right to privacy, but this goes against the Constitution. Like, this is
Right. And it's kind of what I mean, though. It's like we start making exceptions, right? For certain,
right.
like I framed it as a slippery slope argument, but like we start making exceptions to the rule. Like, well, like we don't, like, who cares if it's unconstitutional in this case? Because like this is a pretty like marginal case anyway. And, we're like, it's something that we all agree we want to crack down on. So you
Right.
make that exception to following the Constitution. And then suddenly you extend it a little bit further, just ratchet it a tiny bit further. Okay, we'll just go a little bit further with this. Like, just pick up the set. Like, it's also like just a safety thing. Like, because the next way this will get used is like social media laws which are already starting to come into place. And I get like why people want to do this, like to restrict like teen access to social media generally, because the people see, understandably, like in a lot of cases, like social media access is being detrimental to like teen mental health. Well, okay, yeah. So then that's how like the social media like mandatory like driver's license thing and verified identity thing is going to end up happening. Is they're going to say, look at the mental health crisis that teenagers are facing, and that's why we need to keep them off social media, and that's why no one under 18 should be able to have a Facebook account or an Instagram account. It's what's going to end up happening, and I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that we should use the government to solve that particular problem.
I agree, and I do think that there's a lot of pressure on parents to get their kids, like, allow them onto social media. But I think that we're seeing basically that there is a mental health crisis, and how do we fix it? I understand the attraction of saying government force is once again the solution, but it's when that becomes the solution, that also becomes the problem. And maybe that's too simplistic, but
Yeah.
the obligation is on the parents to take care of their children. I, I don't know, man. When I look around
Yeah.
this world, Kevin, I see Munchausen's everywhere, right? Like, people are signaling their illnesses at an alarming rate. And I don't know that I mean, I'm kind of digressing off of our topic, but I think that I understand the appeal of saying, hey, the government should take care of this,
Yeah. Well, it seems
So,
like, like they can just fix this with this one simple thing. And what could the additional consequences possibly be? Right. But
yeah,
it gets
and one
that.
right,
Go
and
ahead.
one step past these laws is an absolute disaster for everybody, right? Like,
Exactly.
you're going to be held accountable for everything you've ever said because your ID is now verifiable. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Right. And
what?
there are a lot of countries where like that is a thing, and
Yeah.
trying to protect anonymous speech in countries where there is an actual threat to free speech, where you can be jailed just for saying something online in a more like direct way.
Yeah, like
That's how you get.
Ireland and
Yeah.
Scotland and China. I mean, we're
Yeah.
we're moving in a direction, in a terribly authoritarian direction, and so there's some sort of saying about, hey, those rights that we don't stand for right now are the rights that we're giving up forever, and it's
Right.
more complicated than that, but it gets us there, or
Yeah.
actually the saying is more profound than that, but I think people get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. We're picking up what you're putting down there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I honestly I didn't expect to spend this much time on this topic. I just
Right.
threw it out. Hey, it kind of went in a direction. That's how these things go, though, right, Tim?
Correct. Absolutely.
So real quick, I want to talk about the Minneapolis rideshare law, which is basically like the they create like a minimum wage of sorts for rideshare as well. And they said, okay, we're gonna have a minimum of $1.40 per mile and 51 cents per minute, which is functionally higher than minimum wage, and force companies to pay for this. And a bunch of companies like, nope, okay, we're out.
Yeah, there you go. People who would voluntarily enter into a transaction based on whatever price is available at the market now are denied an opportunity to make extra cash. Do you know how
Yeah,
these things work? Like basically you have an app on your phone. You turn it on when you want to go pick people up. You turn it off when you're done working. It's a
that's right.
very simple way to pick up some extra money.
Yeah, right.
So,
Like governments keep trying to turn these folks into employees, but they're not. They're not employees in that way. Like again, it's you want to make some extra money, you turn on your phone, right? And like sometimes like you make a lot of money, sometimes like you don't, but like
yeah,
that's what you do. It and now instead of like protecting these workers and making sure that they are guaranteed a higher wage, uh, they can't earn a living at all. And people are like, oh, how dare Lyft pull out of this city? Like no, like the company would have been liable for all that, regardless of how much profit they were making. And so, like at best, they pass on all that cost to the users, which like okay, instead of having like a dynamic price for this stuff and deciding like whether or not the drivers obviously felt it was worth it before. Because again, all they
right,
have to do is not drive. If they're like, ah, this stinks, they can go do something else. Like, they're
right.
not like required to do this. Just
And Uber and Lyft have implemented surge pricing in these situations. So there's times when they're making really good money,
yeah,
probably way above this minimum wage thing. And then, like, look, what if you want to do it in the morning and you have like 2 hours to make some money and you just want to put a little like cash in your pocket? The government protecting people is a real problem. I think we've touched on this subject a bunch tonight, though. But here's all right, I lost track of what I was going to say, Kevin, and I apologize. But where are we at?
well, we are at a break actually, so
Okay.
we'll have to add the break. Thanks WYSL audience for listening to a free solution. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right, now
Yeah.
we can jump into different topics. If you
Yeah,
want
my
to,
brain
but
is a little bit off tonight. I keep starting
yeah,
down a
but
path, and then I'm all of a sudden I'm like, what the heck was I going to say? I hate
yeah,
it. I hate that.
yeah, but by the way, Seattle. I was going to mention the other law. Seattle basically did something similar, where food delivery drivers have to like um, make a minimum amount of money
Yeah,
in order for them to be able to operate in that city, like for these companies to be able to operate in that city. And as it turned out, like the delivery companies just added fees onto everything, and now everyone's like, "Wow,
sure.
why did this get so expensive? Like, why is our food delivery like ridiculous now? Like, I'm so mad about this." Well, your government did that to you.
Yeah,
You're trying to help drivers, but they these
and
companies like it ended up hurting the drivers a lot because now like suddenly people like, whoop, that's now out of my price range, so I'm just not going to do this anymore,
right.
and the drivers have lost money.
Yeah, the real minimum wage is zero, right? Like
That's
that's
right.
that's the issue. If the government does so much to help people that people do not have those options anymore, then they're not making that money. And I think that's where I was going towards the end of that last segment, and I
Yeah.
somehow got sidetracked from saying that. Wild.
The
I don't
Yep,
know.
the real minimum wage is always 0. That's
It's
what we have to
always
remember.
zero. Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can't make consumers, like, pay for something either. I mean, unless you're a public sector union, then you could do that. But, like, in
Correct.
a
You can loot the treasury.
That's right, you get your share of the loot. But, like, for stuff that people had to voluntarily like, because again, like, it's not like these companies are like, well, I guess we're just going to like take bigger losses out of our profit so we can like be generous to our drivers. There's not enough money to do that. Like you can't these people who are always like, oh, like, well, if the CEO took a pay cut, I'm like, no, it's not enough. Like you don't
Right.
understand the scale of what's happening here. Like it doesn't work. You have to pass the costs along to the consumers, and the consumers might just say, well, that's above my margin now. Like that's that additional marginal cost pushes me out. Sorry, I'm
Well,
done. I'm not
and
buying it
that's
anymore.
right, and that's the thing with corporate taxes that those taxes especially are passed right along to the bottom line. They drastically affect the low income people and middle class people, and it's like you try to explain that to these people who are virtue signaling and like, let's take on the big corporations, let's tax them more. And it's like, it simply is an organization that takes whatever costs it has and passes them along to the consumer to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
That's it. End of story. That's what they do. So
100% what's happening.
Yeah.
All right.
They should just grant us power, Kevin, for a couple weeks, and we would straighten everything out.
Trust us, we would totally use it responsibly. Don't worry, just give us all the power here, and we're gonna use it well, guys. I don't know. We would never use the power in an inappropriate way.
Well, that first of all, we would pull back on the increasing authoritarianism. I would probably on some level try to outlaw identity politics. But other than that, like people can kind of be who they are. And I'm cool with that. But when people are trying to like, I don't know, make money off of it, make people angry with one another off of it to increase their own sense of power, to increase their own sense of virtue, that I think that should be illegal, punishable by who knows what. But, you know, I've mentioned before on the show how much I hate identity politics.
I don't like them either. I know what's the appropriate punishment. They're gonna read some Thomas Sowell, and Tim's gonna send them to re-education camps. It's just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't send them to re-education camps, they're sending me. So, I mean,
you gotta do it first.
Yeah, it's only fair.
All right, you're sounding like a Republican, Tim. That's
I know I can't help it. I feel bad about that. I'll take everything. No, we're just caught. We're hitting libertarian conundrums, right? And that does send my brain in a spin, right? Like, okay, do I want my kid to have access to Pornhub? Do I want my 8-year-old to accidentally hit Pornhub, like if they're on social media and just get inundated with, porn? No, I don't want that to happen, right? So the option is don't get my kid on social media, or rigorously use apps that protect my kids from websites like that. And arguably that you have those tools available to you, that is a better way than sacrificing all of our privacy in the name of some other kid's safety. That's probably what I should have said during the show. That makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, no, exactly. Like you as a parent have the power to be able to do that, and it's your responsibility. I think people try to outsource a lot of parental responsibility to the government. It's easy for me to say because my kids are still like young, but like,
right.
But it is a problem though. I think because I hear this all the time, but both from the left and the right, like just like the government needs to do this thing, either protect my kids from social media or teach them this thing. Like,
right.
Okay.
Right.
Like, yeah, but like you could also do that. And I know that's not a thing available to all kids, but like you should take the responsibility to do that for your kids. The government.
Right. And I do think that's the crux of the argument there, is that they start saying it, well, it's not really for my kids because I take care of my kids pretty well. But there's lots of kids out there who have crappy parents. And I just want the government to step in for those kids with crappy parents. And it's like, you don't know what you're asking for. Like you're missing the plot. Haven't you seen what happens when we make laws to help protect the other guy? Anyway,
yeah, that doesn't go the way you'd expect.
Right. It always ends up being onerous and burdensome to you.
Yeah, but anyway, we should actually go back now.
All right,
and we'll talk about some of the immigration stuff.
We got to talk about immigration stuff. I have a great story, and I want the WSL listeners to hear.
Right, we'll start out with that. We'll go back in 8 seconds, and then we'll get to the news. I think both of us saw on Twitter earlier today. All right, back in 3, 2. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Hey, Kevin. A lot of our friends in the WSL audience don't probably understand, I would say, some of our views on immigration, but I want to bring home a situation that's happening.
I know some do. Some are great, but
okay, but right. No, absolutely. But I think there's first of all, it's used as a an identity politics tool, a weapon. It's been weaponized. The arguments over immigration have been weaponized against each other. There certainly is incentivized immigration that is, I think, creating problems for lots of people all over the country, especially in densely populated areas that don't have the infrastructure ready. And it looks like, kind of a monetary shakedown. But there's real people at the crux of the immigration problem. Okay. So I'm familiar with a company in my local area that does a lot of business, that does hire, sponsor people on visas to come here and do jobs that are difficult and interesting and challenging, and sometimes require a lot of hours per week. They certainly have trouble finding ideal candidates who are up to the task of these jobs. So they basically have this system where they help these people get visas. They give them, and look, it comes up to an issue of visa renewal, and they plan for years in advance to help these people take some time off, go visit their home country, redo their visa applications, spend time with their family, maybe help sponsor somebody else to come to this country who's also going to be a contributing member of society.
Mhm.
And what's going on right now, Kevin? Here's the thing. These people are going home to renew their visa applications, and their visas are being denied. Now, they already have gainful employment in the United States. They already have a residence in the United States. They've already worked for years, paid taxes, and contributed to their local communities. Like,
Yeah.
now,
And again, these are folks who are here legally, right? Like they're
legally, absolutely
yeah,
100% legally. There's no equivocation there. I think that some people get confused about seeking asylum. I think that perhaps the system is too big, but seeking asylum does not make you an illegal immigrant. Okay, you're seeking asylum. Now, does that program need to be reworked or another look? Like,
yeah, it's a bit messy right now.
right, it's disgustingly messy. But we're talking about, and I've talked about this visa system in the past, where I get very frustrated when there are people here on agricultural visas and a farm is holding their visa, and they have one problem with the owner of that farm, and all of a sudden now their visa gets revoked and they're illegally here. I think that is completely inappropriate. It's a disproportionate
Mhm.
power, and it's a tough gig for working on farms. Like, you don't deserve to be treated like that. If you're willing to work on a farm, the least you could do is, like, all right, at least you have a visa still available and you can go get a job on another farm. I think that's feedback that people can deserve, and I think that's okay, but the visa shouldn't automatically expire based on the whim of somebody that's employing you. But this is worse than that. This employer, they love these guys, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
good people. They're very proficient in what they do. And so now, like, what do, Kevin? What would be the logical response is cancel the visa vacation and keep them here, because the system supports that much better. You see what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah, right.
now all of a sudden we've this person has been forced into a situation where now they're going to be considered illegal after having been here legally, after having contributed taxes, after having done a good job loyally and faithfully for a long time. We're talking, I think, 4 years
Right.
is
They've
the
done
length of the
things
visa.
right, and then,
Yeah. Bro,
and
it's
like
so
that's
long.
okay. Like that's why you end up with people who are like, why should I bother trying to like go through the system correctly? Because they hear things like that and they're like, well, if I'm gonna follow all the rules and get a job and build relationships, have a place to live and all this, right? Build a life, just to have the government say like, we're just not going to renew it this time. Like what? Like how could you do that? Why? What's the incentive for the government to do that other than like indifference or malice? Like it's ridiculous.
Well, I think it's indifference. I think it's malice, and I think it's virtue signaling, right? Like, they're like, hey, here we've forced people back to their home country. They probably classify it as a deportation on some level, right? And
Right.
that's a real problem. They're playing a statistical game with human beings' lives that are again. I'm just very frustrated by the story. I think that this is the story that gets lost in incentivized immigration, in the mess that has been made of uh, the asylum process. It's just a mess, Kevin. And then this is who gets hurt, right?
Yeah,
People that have
exactly.
made a commitment, followed through on their commitment, and kept their end of the bargain.
Yeah, 100%. And the government's just hurting those folks. And that's what, like, like Woody and I talk about immigration reform. We're also like, we're talking about stuff like that. Like, hey, could you just stop doing that? Like, stop making life difficult for the people who do everything right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just
That seems like a pretty fair request, you know?
yeah,
And look, there's lots of the visa system is very expensive if you don't have a company that goes and headhunts you to it from another country, right? So, like, if you try to bring yourself into the visa system, that is very expensive. The people that get here on a visa spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time, and I think we've absolutely have an obligation to treat them better. Period. Regardless of what people are seeing at the border, regardless of incentivized immigration, this visa system is messed up, and we're treating people who jump through the hoops, Kevin, of our system. They made some lawyer rich somewhere, right?
yeah, right.
Well, rich is probably but certainly contributed to his earnings, and they get treated like garbage. It's wrong. It's an injustice. So anyway,
Mhm.
how's that?
Yeah, no, pretty good. We're on the same page about this one.
Yeah,
And I'm glad you shared that stuff because it's what folks go through all the time. It's terrible. I've seen stuff like that happen more
sure.
often than I think either of us would like to see. But uh, I do want to talk about a tougher issue though, because we got still like 8 minutes left.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, we'll talk about the issue of the news that was going around today. We'll just talk about it. It's kind of like an abstract topic. Illegal immigrant can carry guns. Federal judge. So some folks were upset about this. Tim, we'll kind of walk. We'll walk backwards with like the clear cut all the way down to like the marginal cases. Should law-abiding citizens be able to own guns, Tim?
Oh, absolutely, right? Like
Right.
that's the issue.
100%. So law-abiding citizens, 100%, they should be able to gun. Should legal immigrants be able to own guns?
Well, absolutely, 100%.
All right, here we go. So makes sense. And I've seen some people say like, "Oh no, this is a right for citizens." No, it's not. Does the Constitution say like we're going to limit the right of the people to bear arms if they're citizens? No. It's the people.
It's
Just the
the
people.
people. Yeah,
So
they should probably export that right back to their home countries as well, and I think that they would be a lot better off, right? Like,
they
they're certainly
probably
fleeing oppression because they may not have access. There may be, extensive gun control in their home countries. But go ahead, keep going.
yeah. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If the people also includes immigrants, does it include illegal immigrants? Should illegal immigrants be able to carry guns
Yeah, so
legally?
right, so legally.
I mean, they
Yeah,
always
I
can
mean,
illegally. Like that's to be clear, you can always have an illegal gun, right? Like it's
yeah,
it. The gun
and
laws do not stop everyone who wants a gun from obtaining a gun, as much
right,
as
and
some folks like to think.
right, and the ATF can regulate people into being a criminal in 24 hours, right? They can write some sort of new law and make a whole bunch of people criminals tomorrow.
Yeah.
So arguably I can get where there would be a conundrum, but I want to say it like this. This is a trap. Conservatives and people who are pro 2A as a general rule have an obligation to understand that people that are not breaking the laws, illegal immigrant that's been here, arguably what you're calling an illegal immigrant that has asylum, absolutely has a right to own a gun. Absolutely has a right to own a gun. There's no other way to have that conversation if you're pro 2A. What do you think about
Yeah.
me taking the hard line there, Kevin?
No, I mean I agree with
Not
you.
going to
Again, like
equivocate about it.
no,
Yeah.
the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment, as we talked about the first segment of this show, the Second Amendment is a restriction on the government, right? And to me, like if again, it gets a bit like messy. Like, okay, if you've broken a bunch of other laws, okay, yeah, but like if you're here, like, because people do this like about asylum seekers too. Like, I think as an asylum seeker, you should be able to own a gun if you want to. Like you should be able to do that.
Sure.
Like, just you're here through a legal process. Again, not a great legal process. It's a mess, but like
Right.
you're here and you want to protect yourself, and like if you're here for asylum and it's a legitimate asylum case too, you might be like worried, like, hey, are people from like gangs in my country like here? I've had to flee my country because I was fearing for my life, and now I go to a country where I have a means of being able to protect myself. Why wouldn't you exercise that? Like, of course, like you'd want to exercise that. Like, and I welcome people who want to do that because they get it. They're coming here to exercise their rights. Good. Yes, I love it. I want more of those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's always that conundrum where, like, okay, they're getting subsidized to be here, right? Like, New York City gave out $10,000 debit cards. Should they be able to take that
Right.
$10,000 debit card and go buy a gun? Should we end the system of subsidies, and would people just chill out then? I don't know.
I mean, probably again, like it's not a great way of doing it, right? Like I get like there's good intentions here. It's just it would be a lot simpler if they just made a easy, simple process for getting in, allowed people to work immediately, and allowed them to support themselves a lot easier, and to have nonprofits take on like and private individual sponsors take on the burden of sponsoring folks, right? Like that's
Sure.
how it should be. And then again, in this case, though, like it's here's a person who is here under like uh whatever circumstances he got in the country, but hadn't been convicted of any violent or nonviolent crimes, and by any other standard would be able to case. But this is where a lot of conservatives kind of fall apart on this issue. They say, "Oh, no, it's just for, like the right type of folks." Oh, all right. I don't
And
know
look,
that we should limit that.
I do want to be clear to my conservative friends who are very pro 2A, but lean more towards a restricted view of the Second Amendment than I would say Kevin or I do, and your average libertarian does. This is, in fact, one of those areas where you are going to ask for laws that will eventually be used against you.
That's right.
Period. Okay. Like, once you let that demon in your house, that vampire in your kitchen, right? That's You're asking for more and more and more. Like, you already then agreed to a Second Amendment restriction. That's it. And so once you start agreeing to Second Amendment restrictions, where does it stop? Certainly the pushback that we've seen over the last few years goes away, right? Like,
Yeah.
that would be my conjecture on this issue. It's a trap. It's bait. Don't fall for it.
Yeah, that's right. And like so you end up clamoring for the restriction and removal of your own rights by saying, well, like I don't want this group to exercise these rights. It ends up coming back on you. And again, like this has sort of been a theme of this show, right? Like it's just be careful what you ask for. Be careful like what groups you attack. It's like that the marginalized groups that like the edge cases of your rights to speech and to protection and into other things, like they matter, right? Because that's the canary in the coal mine for this stuff, that they will start going after other stuff. And on that note, something to keep in mind, WSL, we're gonna end the show. Thanks again for joining us here on a free. I know we're out of time. We're out of time for the show.
Oh my
Appreciate
God.
you all
And
joining us.
and a couple more for our WYSL friends, but I understand that the show's got to end at some point, Kevin.
Got to end. We got a limited time here, but we appreciate y'all listening. We're going to keep talking in the podcast afterwards. So go look us up if you want to hear what else we talk about. Thanks again for joining us on Free Solution. Have a great night, folks. Take care. All right. Tim, you got some other stuff?
I've got some other stuff, man, and it would have been good for the WYSL audience to hear it. But New York adds 24 new speed cameras on Route 17, I-84, I-684, I-95 and the LIE, Kevin. So what we now have are like automated policemen sending out tickets. It's just fantastic. Like,
Yeah.
think of the revenue. Think how cheap it is to just have a camera recording people's speeds and sending out tickets versus actually having to catch people speeding and pull them over and give them a piece of paper. Thank goodness for our government.
Well,
Right?
they hey, actually, let me make the contrarian case for this, right?
Okay.
Because the case for these speed cameras and whatnot is, and for red light cameras, although I've been a victim of one of those in the past, and Rochester had them, is that they catch people doing an actual illegal activity, an activity that isn't a victimless crime, that puts people in danger, pedestrians and other drivers. And by outsourcing this to speed cameras and not completely relying on police officers, you reduce negative police interactions from roadside traffic stops. Tim, what do you think of that argument?
I don't hate it. Again, I get caught in these libertarian conundrums, right? Of okay, but still, shouldn't an actual victim be present in a crime? Shouldn't it not be just some revenue collection system for the state? And
It
that's
does feel like
where,
revenue collection.
yeah, it's. I mean, these cameras on the LIE, like everybody's speeding. They're going to make millions and millions of dollars a day.
And well, if they didn't want to pay those fines to the state, then they should have followed the law.
Right, but there's already a congestion problem, and the congestion problem leads to a waste of valuable economic resources and energy, and certainly contributes to too much carbon being put into the air, Kevin. Which is hard for me to argue because, like, there's an overblown hysteria about. But anyway, so you can see
Yeah.
the counter argument to that, right? Like, here we are. If we allow people to drive fast and they're not causing accidents, we're certainly getting a more efficient version of transportation on these major highways. That would be the counter to the counter, right? I don't know. It makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. No. It's. I mean, for me, for the most part, the libertarian means to look. It doesn't seem right having these speed cameras. Like they just. I get the argument. Like
Sure.
I that's like I tried to make the best version of the argument possible, but I'm like,
Yeah.
it kind of feels like a shakedown. Still.
It's absolutely a shakedown. Like, look, if we leave people to organize their travel on these major highways to the best of their ability, and really just try to rule out the extremes where people are going 95 or 100 miles an hour because they're having an emotional breakdown,
Yeah.
but we let some people drive 80 and we let some people drive 60. Certainly that would increase the efficiency. It would probably cut down on congestion at some point. Like, self-organization in those systems would be better. That's my opinion on it. And I think it actually, we see it working. All right. That's what I'm saying is happening now. Now these speed cameras are going to create, brake checkpoints where people are like, oh my God, I'm going 75 and I got to slow down because I know that camera's there. It's
Yeah.
going to create congestion.
It might.
That's
It
the
might.
science of it, Kevin.
Yeah. But
How about this bloodbath thing? Like,
Not
this
the
is big
bloodbath thing.
Trump stuff. Like, this guy.
Tim, you're gonna
is-
defend Trump causing. He said he's gonna have a bloodbath if he
Yeah.
loses. Like, Tim, like we don't have to explain what that means. Like, it's pretty obvious. He's threatening people. Tim.
Yeah, we don't need the context of what he said. And look, there was actually plenty to be wildly offended about what he freaking said, but bloodbath is literally the least of my concerns, Kevin.
Yeah.
Literally, the word bloodbath has nothing, no significance to what he actually said. That is epically dangerous and completely damaging to the poor and the middle class in our country. So, are you familiar with what he said? What he threatened to do?
Yes.
Okay. What a psychopath, bro.
but
That guy's nuts.
he actually is a psychopath. Like his actual comments are like unhinged. It's just like the headlines are like more dangerous than ever. Trump warns of bloodbath if he's not reelected.
Oh my
And
God.
like that was a MSNBC audience.
Sure.
And
it was repeated. It did that thing that everybody sees that drives people crazy, where MSNBC leads with a headline, and then every other news agency, except for maybe Fox, parrots it or repeats it and says it nearly word for word. Is it laziness or collaboration? That's my question.
yeah, like I think it's mostly like laziness and people like and like they want to generate headlines because it is a shocking headline. Oh, bloodbath! I gotta see what Trump said about the bloodbath. And a lot of times they'll give context in the articles themselves, unless they're really partisan hacks. But because the actual context was there's going to be a bloodbath for the auto industry if Trump loses, because Joe Biden's going to ruin the auto industry, and Donald Trump's gonna fix everything with tariffs, like
Yeah,
100% tariffs.
100% tariffs. Now, 100% tariff, even if he doesn't do 100% of Chinese goods with 100% tariff, is going to drastically impact what you pay for 75 to 90% of what we buy in this country. Like, we are a mass producing, consuming society. That's a reality. The Chinese are really good at mass producing things that we consume. There's a symbiotic relationship there. We did a whole show where I was like, I love China and Walmart. You know what I mean? And I'm not kidding. There's an efficiency to production and an efficiency to trade that tariffs interfere with, where free trade benefits the lower middle class. It benefits the poor way more than how it would benefit the rich. The rich could afford to have their toothpaste custom made, for example. Whereas the cheaper I can buy my toothpaste, the happier I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to hurt the poor the most, and Donald Trump is proposing policies that are going to. I mean, honestly, they're going to destroy the American auto industry, because like it's just going to make it more difficult for American auto manufacturers to import parts they need. Because we're not even talking about whole cars, because we're not really getting whole cars from China. Like, it's just not like how it works and how it's going to work, even
Right.
in the kind of medium term future. No, it's talking about parts, right? And trying to like reshore American stuff. Because it's also talking about like imports from like Mexico too, which like the NAFTA and subsequent agreements, free trade agreements with Canada and Mexico, like make it make sense for there to be some production in Mexico, but not all of it is. Some of it is in the US. It's parts of it are in Mexico and Canada and the US. And like we have this system where goods move across borders easily, where countries can like exploit the advantages that they have in terms of like labor resourcing or whatever to make stuff, and like we as consumers end up benefiting from that. And Donald Trump's going to ruin it. And by the way, if you're like, oh man, that's why I got to vote Joe Biden. No, Joe Biden is like worse on this stuff, like somehow like actually worse on like this ridiculous protectionist nonsense. And they're both going to ruin several industries in the United States.
I mean, they prop up their favorite industries. They ruin their least favorite industries. It's going to be a wild time, Kevin. There's issues here. And look, again, I want to reiterate the term bloodbath. It meant nothing compared to 100% tariff. It meant nothing. Like, it was literally in context.
Didn't matter.
Yeah, it was nothing. It was
Like,
silly.
I know, like the mainstream media gets, because we have this stupid conversation so many times, like not you and I specifically, but I mean like nationally, where like Donald Trump will say something that sounds kind of over the top. It's taken way out of context. And the actual context is terrible, but we don't get to discuss the actual issue that he brought up. We're not talking about protectionism right now. We're talking about how Trump said bloodbath. And so the mainstream media is like, oh, he's so dangerous. Look at him promising a bloodbath. And then the Republicans are like, they're ridiculous. Like, he didn't promise a bloodbath. Fake news media. And then no one's talking about the actual shit policies that he has.
There's absolute garbage. There's an absolute garbage policy behind this threat, like this whole conversation. And look, there are propagandists on Twitter, and they have been repeating the word bloodbath like at an exponential rate. I have never seen anything like it. It's like they're creating a new myth. They know it, and they all want to participate in it on the floor. Is that?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's nutty. It's nutty, Kevin.
it is.
Yeah,
No, it is nutty. And
not
it's just
for me.
I don't know. I'm bored / annoyed with this this game we keep playing with this stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe we'll eventually move past it, and people will stop like clicking on those headlines, because like I don't want to like give these organizations clicks anymore who like start this stuff off, right? Like who start off
I
with
want
like
them to
this.
die, right? Like I want them like so there's my quote. Tim wants them to die. But I want the mainstream media to go ahead and stop its death throes, reinvent itself, and move on to something that really serves society, because this is a farce, like this is an absolute farce to be this involved in campaigning politically. They all do it.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous, it's absurd, and it's embarrassing.
yeah.
It's
So
not the world
to
I
me,
want to
like
leave my kids, Kevin.
I don't want them to die. I want them to do better, right? Like
Right.
just like do better, like produce actual news, like talk about like the impact of like tariffs on, like these things. Like it's I don't know, like media literacy needs to get better. That's like the main like takeaway for me is like I wish we were talking about the actual things, because there's just some actual stuff that matters here.
Sure.
Um
But government schools are not going to teach media literacy. It was an issue like lacking in my child's education, whereas in my education it was something that we discussed. And that was at the time, back at the time we would talk about subliminal advertising, and it turns out that that was kind of a farce, but we would talk about dissecting news stories, finding the grains of truth, and finding the grains of narrative or and it was hard back then to find a journalist's bias in a news story. But now it's impossible to not see their bias because they lead with it.
yeah, I do. I don't know, like part of me is like, okay, that's fine. But like we as consumers need to like be better judges of that. We need to understand what we're
Sure.
consuming, and then we need to like ask for and consume news that like actually gets to factual reporting on stuff.
Sure.
You know,
Like
that's
kind of what you and I do. We offer our opinions on the news of the day. We point out
yeah,
the fact that the word bloodbath is literally insignificant compared to what the overall message of what he said was that he can manage the car industry with tariffs, right? He
yes,
can control competition with tariffs. He can control the cost of production with tariffs to punish the Chinese. Like there's racial animus there. Like I get that the CCP is a real freaking problem, okay? But like the world wants to be at war with China. Our political leaders want us to be at war with China. And I'm telling everybody, you got to chill out because they make great stuff. And it's the people in the country that are making the stuff. It's not the CCP. Like, and plus, people are animated over this whole TikTok thing. You've picked the side, right? That TikTok is the devil, right? It's some data aggregator for the Chinese government, and it's like, what are they going to do with all that data? Sell me like more garbage through like Timu? Okay. All right, some of the garbage I like. Like I can't get purple sneakers at Walmart, bro. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, come
right.
on.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's we're gonna get like more aggressive Alibaba ads. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
my God. I bought something off of there and I'm getting like 47 emails a day. I'm never buying anything from them again. It's got to stop.
I've heard that. It's I hear it's kind of rolling the dice on quality and what they're gonna follow up with you afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's, I mean, based on what I see, there's a lot of follow up for sure. Like they really want to know how it's going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. It's just good customer service.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
they want to know how
Absolutely.
you feel about stuff, and want to show you what other opportunities are available if you like their one thing you bought.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
So, I don't know. I had one more, Kevin. Are you
All right.
near Hamburg, New York?
Hamburg, New York. Well, it's a little ways west of here, but
Okay.
I'm familiar with it.
Did you know that the DEC went in? Now check this out. Like there is actually a libertarian conundrum in here. All right. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation wrote that its officers seized a 750-pound alligator from an individual's residence in Hamburg, New York on March 13th. The department noted that the individual had a license for the alligator, but that it expired in 2021.
Oh,
The department also said that this individual built an addition to his house, installed an in-ground swimming pool for his roughly 30-year-old alligator. So, like, look, whoever owned this alligator was way into taking care of it. Like, they're like, hey, that alligator can't really see that well. This is what you've got to do. Like, all of this information comes out. So, why would the DEC get involved with seizing an alligator? Like, they had a license. Again, it's like the visa expiring. You know what I mean? It's like the government red tape did not get answered. It's a real freaking problem.
That's a shame, if he's taking care of the alligator well. Like, I mean, it's different. Like if it's a case of like abuse or something, right? Okay, like I sort of get. I'm okay with that, but
Sure.
just like
Arguably, if we have to have a government that does something, okay, like this guy's abusing this alligator, fine, okay, I'm not going to argue that. But this guy's had this alligator for 34 years. He forgot to renew his permit. They confiscated the alligator. What are they going to do with it, Kevin? What is the DEC going to do with a 750-pound alligator?
That's a great question. I haven't. I did see this story. I did not look into it that much, so I don't have the answer of like what the government intends to do with this alligator at this point.
Right. Well, it caught my eye, obviously, right? So, what the government does with situations like that? This alligator has vision problems. All right. What the government does is if they can't find it a home immediately, they have some sort of euphemism for it, but they're going to cook the alligator, Kevin. Like that's what the government does. Yeah, I mean, they're probably not going to make food out of it, but they're going to take care of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're going to euthanize the alligator.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, yeah, because that's the thing that happened. Like, I've seen like what'll happen in some of these cases, because like a big case that happened recently with like an animal sanctuary where there was actual allegations of like abuse and not caring for the animals, but like sometimes they go to like the local like kind of regular animal shelter, and sometimes they'll go to wildlife sanctuaries. A lot of times they usually won't euthanize the animal unless there's like a health related reason to do it, right? Like, because sometimes it'll happen where a bunch of horses get seized or something. Usually they'll try to take care of them, unless like there's a real, unless there's a quality of life reason why they can't.
Right. Okay. So the problem is, it's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So this guy didn't renew his alligator license, and now, like, I can't help feeling bad for a freaking alligator who would probably eat me if I took the wrong step in his stupid swimming pool. But like, I can't help feeling bad. Like the government overreach is amazing. It's a real issue. Like just let the guy pay, a $20 fine and fill out a new license for his alligator, right? Like that's it. It could be done.
Yeah, that's what it should be. But like he didn't fill out the paperwork correctly because he apparently had tried. And they said that like there's public contact with the alligator, which is basically like someone had taken a picture with him. Oh my God. Yeah, right. Like, which is,
oh my fucking God. Somebody took a selfie with a fucking alligator. So the DC came in and said, hey, you didn't fill out your paperwork and we're going to eat the alligator.
Presumably, they say they're going to move the alligator to a permanent facility, but you're like, Tim, you're like, no, they're going to make gator skewers.
I figured, look, he's got a permanent facility. This dude built a freaking in-ground pool for his pet
Did.
alligator. Like, all right,
New
so look,
York.
yeah. So how old you got to be to buy an alligator? I'm guessing you don't buy an alligator when you're 12. You buy an alligator when you're 20. This guy is 55 years old. He has a sick old alligator, and now the DC, like, end of life plan, the DC comes in and takes the alligator. There you go. Congratulations, New York. You saved nothing. Like, the alligator's not a menace. Has anybody been injured by the alligator? There's no allegations of any of that. So
No. No allegations of injury or abuse, just bureaucracy.
I am annoyed that my tax dollars fund that organization. Among many other organizations.
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to remember. You made the joke about like eating the alligator, but like there was I'm trying to find the case, but there's like a case where like a police department like did eat like an animal seized.
Oh my God, I remember we talked about it on the show, didn't we?
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know. Oh my God.
Oh, and there's also the one with the goat too. We did talk about
apparently.
because there's like the one where like they were going to save the goat from slaughter, and because it was like it had won like some sort of competition or something, and then they someone had bid on the goat and they were going to slaughter it, and then they ended up like taking it back. And then the police,
it was a contractual law situation. They like sold the goat, and the police were like, "Well, we're taking the goat," and then they didn't deliver the goat to the people that bought it. They cooked it themselves. I'm pretty sure we'd have to
like
kind of search
I'm gonna have
back.
to find it again.
God, that was funny.
Yeah.
To my local Oneana listeners, let's give a big shout out to the local Oneana government for creating a hotline to report deer interactions in the city of New York. It's, guys, there's no limits to what the government can do for you.
Gotta know what those deer are up to.
I mean, I think it's because they're going to hire a guy to come in and off them. You know what I mean?
Probably. Well, you're creating the justification, right? Like, oh, we have deer here, and then okay, this justifies like getting rid of the deer because not enough people are hunting them, which is an actual problem. It's a thing.
It's a real problem. They have systems. There's a guy that does it on YouTube, and he goes around and like beds down in camouflage on the kid's like swing set, right? And then drops a deer in somebody's backyard. So I think that's what Oneana is heading for. I'm sure. Oneana has several areas that do not allow hunting, where hunting would be effective, okay? Where it would be possible, where it would not be dangerous, and certainly that would have an impact on a nuisance deer population. But, they got to do it their way. They got to hire a hunter. They got to keep everything under control. So, whatever.
Yeah. All right. On that note, though, I think we're going to call it a night.
Sure. Absolutely, brother.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, folks. Appreciate y'all being here. Have a great night.